We're here under the hood of my 1995 BMW 525i. This is an E34 chassis car, and in this video we're going to be going in depth into the replacement of the valve cover gasket in this car. So there were a lot of engine options in these cars. This is going to be very specific to the M50 that was available in a lot of mid to later year cars, and it's not going to be as relevant to single overhead cam and V8 engines. But that being said, let's go ahead and jump on in. So our first step, as always, is going to be to remove these two beauty covers, starting with this one up here because it kind of overlaps a little bit. And to get to the hardware that holds these down, there's these little covers. We just got to pop those off. I like using a 90-degree pick to avoid scuffing up these covers, but you can use a flat head as well if you really need. The pick just works a little bit better. And then underneath of those covers is going to be 10mm hardware. It's two 10mm bolts up on top here, and then two 10mm nuts down here. I'm missing the bolt in the back. But I'm not too worried about it. So I just lift up off there. Take the oil cap off. There we go. Alright, so now we have access to all our coils underneath, and these are all 10mm as well. I'm going to start by breaking them all loose. There we go. And then we can go ahead and remove all these nuts. Now we can go ahead and unplug all these coils. And at this point, before pulling them out of the car, you might want to number them. It's good practice to be able to remove and put them back into the same cylinder, especially if you have other issues going on with the car, such as a misfire or something like that you're trying to track down. That way you can identify which cylinder, which coil it could potentially be. These are already numbered, so I'm going to just go ahead and pull them out. So at this point, the last coil-related item that we need to remove is going to be this harness of wires around here, and that's held on with three 8mm bolts. There's one in the back here that you can't quite see on camera, but we'll get that one as well. So we're going to go ahead and lift this up off of here, and we're just going to fold it back out of the way. So when you're folding this up out of the way, one thing I would recommend so that you're not putting all the stress right here at this joint on the wires is kind of bend these wires up here instead of putting all that strain right down here on this little joint. And then you're just going to want to take something with a little bit of weight, like another tool or something, to set on top of there just to hold them in place gently. Now we have two things left that we need to remove. First of all, we have this little ground strap right here, which is held down with an 8mm nut on top of this stud. And then we have this vacuum hose up here that connects with our crankcase ventilation and all that. So there's this little tab on top. You're just going to want to work that back. And then once that tab is unclipped, you're just going to gently pull this backwards until it comes unseated. And now at this point, everything is clear from the valve cover, and we're ready to start undoing all of these nuts around the outside. These are all 10mm, and there are 15 in total. 4 up top, 4 down bottom, 3 in the front, and then 4 down the middle. Now we should be able to spin all these right out. So this is what those nuts look like. This is the nut itself, and there's a washer and then a grommet here. Alright, so at this point we should be ready to peel this thing off of here. Just gonna give it a tug, and it popped right on up. So sometimes these can be stuck. A good place to try to pry is from up here, up under this little lip here, where this vacuum hose mounted up, going between there and somewhere back here, just being careful of the wires and things. And then other than that, it's just a matter of giving it a tug and hoping that the person who did this job before didn't glue everything down with a ton of sealant. So I'm just gonna lift this up and off. And then as you can see, in my case, all of the gaskets kind of stayed behind, so you're gonna have to peel those out separately and then just toss those. So now is a perfect opportunity to give a general inspection of your valve train, taking a look at your cams, making sure there's no unusual pitting or corrosion around the lobes. You can also remove this plastic cover. This is covering your intake camshaft, and you can take a look under there as well. Taking a look in here, this is a 240,000 mile engine, and all things considered, it's still running great and it looks great. Even though things are looking a little more amber than silver, that's just fine, and I'm not worried about it one bit. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna freshen up all of our hardware. And literally all we need to do in order to do that is remove the old grommet. And then we take the nut, washer, new grommet, press them together with this little ridge facing down like that, just the same as the old one, and it's ready to go back in the car. So we just do that 14 more times for all 15 of these nuts, and then we'll be ready for the next step. All right, so all our hardware is ready to go with new grommets. And at this point, we're gonna bounce back over to the car and do a little bit of work there, and then we'll be ready to get our valve cover in place. So back under the hood, we need to do a little bit of prep work to make sure that we're ready to install our new valve cover gasket and ensure that there aren't any leaks in the future. So the big thing we wanna do is we wanna clean up the mating surface all the way around here and around each one of our spark plug wells, just to ensure that everything is clean and there's nothing in the way of our seal working as it should. So the way I'm gonna do this is I'm just gonna use a rag with brake clean, and I'm gonna work my way all the way around and just give it a general wipe down everywhere where the seal meets up. And then in addition, all the places where there's RTV, which is this silicone gasket maker, I'm just gonna use my fingernail to remove the excess of that while I'm working my way around. So this is me coming in with the razor blade just to remove these little bits of extra RTV. Just being really careful, again, not to scratch the surface. All right, so all our surfaces are nice and cleaned up, but before we can actually drop our new gaskets in, we need to reapply RTV, that silicone gasket maker. It's gonna be the two seams, top and bottom, where our upper timing cover meets the head. We're just gonna put a little smear on that seam. Doesn't need to be anything crazy, just needs to fill that seam, that's all. Gonna get that top and bottom, just a little skim. And then in the very back to the two half moon shapes, the little dips that go down into the head, really focusing it at the corners, at the sharp parts, because those are the parts that really like to leak. But I usually do a skim all the way around just to make sure that things set up properly, because this is the only spot that there is a little bit of a funky shape. And now at this point, we can take our new gasket and just lay it in place. So we want to make sure that we're already lined up before we set it down. That way we don't smear this RTV around too much. Get lined up there. We're also going to make sure that our two little half moon shapes are nice and situated back here in the back. And then we have two more gaskets. Those are the gaskets that go around our spark plug wells. So they kind of have a little bit of a cup. That side goes down towards the engine. Just kind of presses in there like that. And now we're ready to take our valve cover and reinstall that. So that's nice and lined up. I'm just gonna get two pieces of hardware and start those just to hold it generally in place. And one piece of hardware to make specific note of is the nut with the stud that comes out of the end that has that ground strap on it. And that installs right here. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and get the rest of the hardware started. We're not tightening anything up yet. We will go over that in just a second. So at this point, with all these nuts started, we're ready to go ahead and torque them down. And these torque to 89 inch-pounds or 10 Newton meters, which is very light. So what I recommend is you get a very small torque wrench like this, a lightweight torque wrench, in order to do this, and make sure that these are actually even. These gaskets are notorious for having very short lifespans, and I have a feeling that a big cause of these failing prematurely is both uneven torques and being over-torqued or under-torqued. Just making sure that this is perfectly to spec and even all the way across, I think is critical to this job actually lasting. So there's a little bit of a strategy to this as well. So what we're gonna wanna do is begin from the middle. I'm gonna start right here and we're gonna radiate outwards in an X pattern like that. And then we'll hit the ones in the front, then we'll hit these across here. All right, so that's all our nuts top and bottom, and now we're gonna do the ones across the middle. Again, starting from the middle and then bouncing our way back and forth, working our way out. Now our valve cover is reinstalled with everything torqued to spec, and we're ready to go ahead and start dropping our coils back in. But real quick before we do that, we don't want to forget this ground strap right here. You just kind of line it up in that little groove, and then this is just a little 8mm nut. Now we can go ahead and drop these coils back in. Now we're going to go ahead and drop our harness for our coils back into place. And I'm going to go ahead and plug these coils in just to get these wires under control. And then we have 3 8mm bolts that hold this harness in place. And now we're ready to reinstall all of the 10mm nuts that hold all our coils in place. And now, very importantly, we don't want to forget to plug this crankcase ventilation hose back in. And now, before we cover this thing up, I want to give a very special thank you to Patuxent Precision Finishes for professionally powder coating this valve cover. He really did fantastic work with it, especially considering the condition that this valve cover was in. These valve covers are made out of a magnesium alloy that starts out as a powdered metal and it gets pressed together rather than melted and cast into this form. So as this begins to oxidize and the coating breaks down over 2+ decades, these valve covers start to get a lot of pits and a lot of really difficult to deal with sort of little issues going on with them. And he was really able to go forward with these despite that and really put in the time and effort to make this look as good as possible. And he also did a set for my granddad's 740 as well, which you will be seeing in a future video. So again, thank you to Patuxent Precision Finishes for really doing a bang up job on this. And let's go ahead and wrap this up by putting our beauty covers back on. And with that, we are all done, and this M50 really is looking better than ever. So that's everything it takes to replace the valve cover gasket in your M50 powered E34. And again, big thank you to Patuxent Precision Finishes for the excellent powder coating work. And if you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe to catch all my future videos. And until next time, I will catch you guys in the next video.